Greetings and welcome, ladies and gentlemen and everyone in between. I'm...
These nuts. Got him!
No, really, actually.
And his name is John C.
In this video, we are updating our top 5 best decks in the Shadow Era meta. Last video was back in November, so let's take a look at our new list. During this video, you'll see a list on the top of the screen over here. You'll see a playthrough of the deck and the list up here. And around in the middle, you'll see a nice big deck code. There's also going to be deck codes for each one of the decks I talk about in the description of the video. So let's get started. Alright, first up, we have Elementalis. Now, I know Elementalis is kind of dropping out of favor a bit in the meta right now, but it's not because Elementalis has gotten any worse.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
It's simply because of more and more fatty decks are coming out. Mage decks are starting to show up again. And Elementalis isn't doing so well against these new mage decks that are coming out. In this list, we are looking at 40 cards. We're looking at 40 cards for each one of the decks I post, because I find them to be the most consistent of decks, especially if you're newer to the game or if you've never used these decks before. 40 cards should make it a lot easier for you to go through. So allies, we have 23 allies in this deck. 4 Cage Savage, 4 Rapacious Vermin, 4 Stardust Transfusers, 4 Voracious Arachnid, 4 Stardust Extractor, and 3 Stardust Amplifiers. Now this deck can vary. You can go 41 cards with a 4th Amplifier. You could do 2 Feasterlings and 2 Vermin instead of 4 Vermin. But because I like to stick to 40 cards, we're sticking to 3 Amplifier. And because of how prevalent warriors are in the meta right now, we are doing 4 Rapacious Vermin. That's going to be your only way of getting rid of attachments. So 4 Vermin we are sticking with. Now, abilities, we've got 12 of them. 4 Permeate, 4 Power Surge, 2 Energy Discharge, 2 Mind Controls. In this fatty meta right now, you could do 1 Energy Discharge and 3 Mind Controls. Especially with more mage decks around too. With those mage decks, you're not likely to be using those energy discharges at all. However, in your regular matches, if you don't get the start that you need as Elementalis, you're going to need that energy discharge to kind of reset the board for you on turn 6. With the 1cc Cage Savage with the 5 cost energy discharge. So I like to go an even split of 2 and 2 on them. And finally, 4 items, we have 4 Gold Laced Shield. Now, coming up to our next list, we have Zhanna Mist. This isn't because I'm biased
Oh, you touch my tra-la-la.
towards Zhanna, okay. Maybe I'm biased a little bit.
My ding-ding-dong.
But no, it's actually still really strong right now. Let's take a look at the list that I have here for Zhanna. 17 allies, 4 Devoted Knight, 2 Tainted Oracles, 2 Knight of the Crimson Dusk, 2 Visca the Scarlet Blade, 2 Nathanius People's Champion, 3 Adlard the Just, and 2 Kion the Magnificence. For this list of allies, I don't see a lot of variation. You could do 2 Adlards, but because of how much more mages are showing up now, 3 Adlards feels like the better fit for the deck, so you can get more reliable heal from Adlard. So we're going with 3 there. For abilities, we are looking at 3 Retreats, 4 Focused Prayers, 1 Resurrection, 4 Tidal Waves, and 1 Mass Purification. For this list, you could go 4 Retreats and 3 Focus Prayers. That extra retreat will help you earlier in the game, especially against these aggro decks. But I found because of how prevalent rogues are, I really want those, and warriors. I really want that 4th Focus Prayer in this deck. So we're going 3 and 4 that list. Also for warriors, Mass Purification, huge effect on them. So you have a lot of tech in this deck to deal with those warriors. 7 items, we have 2 Book of Curses, 4 Wizened Staffs, and 1 King's Pride. Again, you could do 2 King's Pride and 2 Adlard in this list. But I found 3 Outlard and 1 King's Pride to fit well for this meta. And finally, 2 locations. We have 2 Anmor Garena Road. So that rounds up our Zhanna list. And now let's move on. We are moving on to Banebow. I still have Undead Banebow on my list. This deck is so consistent, you guys. I know Victor is moving up in the lists in the meta right now. But Undead Banebow is still really consistent. So we have 20 allies in our Banebow list. 4 Harbingers of the Lost, 2 Krugel Braggarts, 2 Deathmage Thaddeus, 3 Death Collectors, 3 Cryptspawn Tormentors, 2 Durkon the Bone Kings, and 4 Forgotten Horror. This list is just really good right now. So the 4 Harbingers, it's discarding a card for you, but you can just as easily discard something important against your opponent, especially if you're talking about warriors discarding a Blood Frenzy or hunters discarding their gambits. It's just a really good tool to have in your arsenal. Then the amount of ally ping that's in this deck with the Braggarts, the Thaddeus, the Bone Kings, the Forgotten Horror. Forgotten Horror targets the highest attack, so it's also a form of tech against these fatties too. Cryptspawn Tormentor and Bone King are also do really well against priests, recycling back from tidal waves. So it's just an overall strong ally list available to you. Now for abilities, we have 3 Sacrificial Lambs, 4 Hunter's Gambit, 2 Perfect Shots, and 1 Widespread Decay. Widespread Decay, also another really good tool to use at your disposal. It can get rid of your Shroud after you've used it or before you use it. Actually, it'll be after you use it.
Smoke weed every day.
To keep the ally that you bring back. Also get rid of the like the Black Market Serena decks, get rid of their items that are in play. Against Priest, gets rid of that Book of Curses for you. There's just a lot of good uses for Widespread Decay. That's why we have 1 in there. 2 Perfect Shots, again, for your fatties. And yeah, overall, really strong list of abilities. And items now, we have 9 of them. We have 4 Necromancer Shroud, 4 Weevil-Tipped Crossbow, and 1 Stun Turret. I like to have that 1 Stun Turret in there just in case of dealing with Kions. So generally Perfect Shots are all you need against fatties, but if you're dealing with a lot of fatties, you're going to want those extra tools available to you. And I like having Stunter as an extra tool. You could also do 2 Soul Seekers and 2 crossbows instead of 4 crossbows, but I like the speed that crossbow allows me to play at, so I have 4 crossbows in this deck. And now our new deck on this list at number 2 is Loest. So this is the Lightning Loest everyone's been saying. This is the build I'm using here. This could be the build that that Dub also uses. I don't know what his variation is right now, but I like this list here. So we have 7 allies. We have 2 Aldmore Artisans, 3 Tempest Runebearers, and 2 Isadora Storm Rages. Isadora is very rarely going to survive on the board. Actually, but if it does survive, it can just end the game for you. So that's why we have those 2 Storm Mages in there. Tempest Runebearers just fits really well with all the spell abilities you have with the attack buff. It also survives Supernova, so you can do 5 damage to an opposing hero with Supernova, coupled with another 3 damage from your Runebearer. Just really strong there. Aldmore Artisan makes your amulets cheaper to play. Also gives you the ability to dig for amulet if you need to, if it's becoming really slow to show up. Now, in the replay that you see on the screen right now, I got a little impatient and played my amulet before using Loest's ability. And now. So I never got to use it. So generally, if you've never played this deck before, wait till you're at around 6 Shadow Energy before using Amulet. I know that sounds like a lot, but you have Shadow Bolts in this deck. So get that ability off before using Amulet. Alright, so again, ability list, 2 Bad Santas, 2 Sinkholes, 4 Fireballs, 4 Lightning Strikes, 1 Transmogrification Curse, 4 Shadow Bolts, 2 Supernovas, 1 Leyline Nexus. Just a really overall good list here. Bad Santa's extra draw for you, because you want to rely on other draw while you get that Shadow Energy up before you start using Amulet. Sinkhole, good for the early game for getting rid of big allies like from Elementalis early that don't have steadfast. Also gets rid of an opposing player's location if they have control of one. That way you can get your quarry back up on inactive. So that really good there. You know, Fireball, standard spell. Lightning Strike and Shadow Bolt, that's your mainstay in this deck. Do not sacrifice those unless you absolutely have to. Transmog Curse, awesome for dealing with fatties. Generally speaking, you use that Transmog Curse on Kion. Because it goes through Steadfast, because the ally does not leave play, it just becomes an item. So it goes through Steadfast, and your ability can't get rid of Kion. Transmog Curse can. 2 Supernovas, great finishing tool, or just great to clear the board. 1 Leyline Nexus, to have a little extra something to deal with Spell Eater bans. If you're playing like against a rogue who's expecting you as a mage, you'll probably need both your ley line and your ability to deal with Spell Eater bans, so keep that in mind for preserving your Shadow Energy. 8 items, we have 2 Loom of Fates. Loom is also extra draw. Pathfinder's Machete, which you want to play with your Lightning Quarry, so you can give it the buff. And 4 Amulet of Conjuring, that's your primary draw. And again, the 4 locations are 4 Irem Lightning Quarries. So that rounds out that Loest deck. Very strong deck. Does take getting used to. You're not gonna just play this for one game and be like, hey, I'm a master at this. It's gonna take games to get used to how this deck plays. And number 1, surprise to no one, Lance still number 1 on the list. It's just every deck that goes out there now that you're building, the first question you ask when you build a deck, can this play against Lance? If it can't play against Lance, don't play it. Alright, 26 allies. 4 Skilled Ironmongers, 4 Night Owls, 2 Sword Thieves, 4 Rabble Rousers, 4 Tainted Oracles, 2 Dahlias, 3 Eris, 2 Nathanias, 1 Kion. This ally list can change. Some decks don't have Sword Thieves. Some decks will have 3 Dahlias and 3 Eris, maybe 1 Nathanias. So that just depends on what you feel like is a threat at the time. This is the ally list that I have narrowed it down to. For abilities, I have 2 Retreat and 4 Stop Thieves. Now, you could have 4 Retreats and no Sword Thieves, but I found that when dealing with Steadfast allies too, I like to have even a number of those because they're mainly early control tools for me. So I've balanced it out between 2 Thieves and 2 Retreats. For Stop Thief, you might see 3 Stop Thief and maybe 1 Anarchic Looting. Like if you're playing like a Serena deck, for example, too, get rid of all their items, or you're playing a Stall deck. But since the goal of the deck is to just get my resources up there so I can start fatty spamming the opponent, I got 4 Stop Thieves in there. Now for items, I got 4 Ankle Breaker, 2 Dagger von Makings, and 1 Spell Eater Bands. That Spell Eater Bands is because of those mage decks, okay? So if a mage deck knows that you are bringing Spell Eater Bands, they're not going to want to use something like a Ley Line or their ability to get rid of your Ankle Breaker or get rid of one of your fatties because they're saving it for your bands. So that's another important clue for dealing with these decks. Like if you're playing against a Lance deck, put Braxnorian Soldier in your deck if you're playing as a human. That way he is forced to deal with it. So if you don't put these items as tech, even though the opposing hero probably has ways of dealing with that tech, by not putting that tech in there, they know that they don't have to worry about dealing with it, and it's just going to make it even harder for you to play against them. So include these tech tools in your deck. If you're worried about Lance, put in Braxnorian Soldier. Do what you can to deal with this haste. Let him deal with your tech, okay? The Dagger von Makings, you can use them early. They're primarily there to be used with Dahlia. That Dahlia Dagger combo is intended to be used against a Braxnorian Soldier or a similar hero like maybe Sentry, if they're a Shadow and they're trying to put in some haste tech in there. So that's generally what these things are for, is to put the haste tech in there. And that rounds out my top 5 list. Woo! So, now, I know there were some decks that did not make it into this list. Believe me, it is very difficult to narrow things down to a top 5. So you could call this a tier 1 list, okay? And I will have another video of bonus best decks. So if this top 5 list is the tier 1, that I feel is tier 1, you can consider my next top 5 video that's coming out to be tier 1.5, where it's close to being there, not quite over that line. So you're going to see a lot of strong decks in there too. So if you're complaining about decks that you haven't seen here in this video, you'll probably see it in the next video, guys. Alright, so thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time. Hey everyone, did you enjoy today's video? Be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Did you hate today's video? Then be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It's really the only way I can tell. Thanks.